Players will skip your Steam page in 5 seconds if your game's visuals don't immediately signal that it's going to be a good game. In this video we'll go through my 6 C's of charming indie game art, my infinity stones for how to make your game look good for players who are browsing the Steam pages and for those who are actually playing your game. These tips combine art fundamentals and gameplay design so that even if you're not an artist, or if you are one, you can make sure that your game's visuals are striking enough and that they grab people's attention and make for a compelling experience for the players. Now, I'm not a great artist, but my games have gotten a lot of feedback that they look really compelling for the players to play and to try. And with this simple 6-step framework I use every day, you too can make sure that your games gets the chance to succeed they deserve. The first C of the 6 C's of charming indie game art is basically, if you make this mistake, your game will look like an asset flip or like AS lob or just a beginner practice game, and then your Steam visitors will not be interested in playing your game because they just assume that if you didn't pay attention to this, then why would you pay attention to making the rest of your game good either? And that is basically lack of consistency. The lack of consistency basically signals to the player that all of your choices are unintentional. You have made your decisions for your art by accident, and that's why everything looks kind of little different. And even if your technical skill is lacking, consistency will signal intent and quality to the players. You know, if you want to look at good art, you're gonna go to the art gallery. But if you want to play a whole holistic experience that was handcrafted by the developer with intent behind every decision, then you need consistency. And for consistency, you need a clear process. So as an indie developer, you should, in the early stages of development, plan out explicitly the whole process for how you make the art in your games. So my process for making sprites is pretty simple. I first sketch out the asset. You know, if I'm making a mushroom, I sketch out something like this. When I'm happy with the shape, I usually actually turn the transparency low, and then I carefully draw the outlines so that the outlines are basically as perfect as they can get. After that, this is just a demonstration, so I'll erase that. But after that, basically, I draw the outlines, then I fill them with color. And for the base layer, I usually try to just have one color per outlined area. And after that, I add some minimal detailing optionally. Not always, but sometimes if I want to add some focus points or some kind of distinct features, then I might add some detailing. And finally, I add shading. And the shading is super simple. In Krita, I basically have this light blue color on a multiply layer. And I toggle the basically the inherit alpha mode on. So if I draw over the if I draw outside of the lines, nothing gets added. You can see that everything that is outside of the layers underneath is just cut off. Just makes it super simple to shade everything. And the idea with the shading is that the light is coming from some kind of up and a little bit to the side direction. And I'm using cell shading, so basically I have a clear separation of light and shadow. Every pixel in the asset is either in the light or in the darkness. And so when I'm drawing in the shadows, I try to think about which like forms are casting the shadows where. So you can see this area is in the light. The cap of the mushroom is casting some shadow here, and then the kind of shape of the shadow means that, or shape of the mushroom's leg stem is casting a kind of a weird looking shadow here. And again, you don't have to be accurate. Like, I didn't really think about what I was drawing here, but since this mushroom is kind of wiggly, I just wanted to make the shadow a little bit wiggly as well. And when you zoom out, like, you don't really notice if it's a little bit off. And if I do all of the assets the same way, you know, just kind of wing it, then it's part of the style. Then it doesn't look like it's it's wrong or anything. So that's basically the way I do the assets. And last thing you want to know about consistency is that your process should also define stuff like what's the like resolution of your assets. Like when you create a new asset and you're thinking about how many pixels to put in your asset, you want to think about like what's the number gonna be. And the idea is to have all of your assets the same scale in your game. And for me, that's going to be 200 pixels per one kind of in-game unit. And this is gonna depend on a lot of factors. For example, how zoomed out is your camera. But the rule of thumb is that if you take your whole camera rectangle, so for me it's like 17 squares in width, then that means that the whole width of the camera, if you did a asset in your game that was the size of the whole camera, then it should be about twice the full HD resolution. So it should be 4K, so 3840 times 2160. Now that's a little inconvenient for actually creating the assets. But basically what you want to do is you want to figure out how many pixels is a single unit in your game. So if my whole screen is 17 units wide, then I want to just divide the 3840 divided by 17. And this is kind of the minimum you usually should be working with. So a single unit in my game should be around 225 pixels. Well, for my game, it's actually 200. It's not, an exact science, but that's a good rule of thumb to make sure that all of your sprites are not blurry or pixelated. I mean, of course, if you're making pixel art game, then it's a whole another question, and you have to use totally different rule set for this. But the real key point here is that you should make this number same for all of your sprites. So if I want to make an enemy that's like really big, like 2x2 squares, then I should make a sprite that is 400 by 400 pixels in size. That way it will be the same size as my player, or same resolution as my player. It of course will be much bigger than my player. And if I want to make it smaller, like something like this, then maybe it doesn't need to be 200, maybe it needs to be something like 150 by 150. And then this smaller enemy, will also be smaller in the game, but it will still be the correct resolution. The second C of charming indie game art is basically the first cousin of consistency. But there's a subtle but meaningful difference here, and it impacts more than just the look of your game. And this one is cohesion. And that's about your game assets belonging in the levels. And it's really important also for getting your game to look intentional, but it's also for gameplay purposes. Cohesion is basically how well the assets fit in your game, and thus if your asset doesn't really fit in your game or in your level, then you're gonna wonder is there a specific gameplay purpose for this asset? The assets that stand out make you think that they are special. So of course, if you want something to stand out, then you should make it look different or have contrast with the other elements. But even for those, you should still make sure that they fit in the game. And for this, I have 2 tips for you how to make your assets cohesive with the rest of your game. And the first one you kind of saw already, and it's the sandbox scene. Take a screenshot of an empty level in your game, and when you're drawing your assets, you can draw them directly into your sandbox level. This way you can see, first of all, if they're the right scale, but also when you're drawing it, you can see if they actually look like they belong in your game. So if you're drawing an enemy or something and it just looks weird in your sandbox scene, then there's a high chance that it's the wrong style or it just doesn't fit your level. The second tip is something I use all the time myself. It's to right away when you're done with an asset, import it into your game and then add it into your game and look at it. If it sticks out, if it doesn't really fit the scene of your level where it's supposed to be in your game, then you can go back to your drawing program, make some adjustment, save your assets, take a look at it. Oh, still not right. Okay, what about now? Now it's getting better, but it's still a little bit sticking out. Then when you're done, okay, now it looks pretty good. Now I think it fits in the game. And now it's much more cohesive with the rest of the level. So that's my tip for cohesion. Make sure that none of your assets stick out if you don't want them to. Now the third C is probably the most common mistake I've seen indie developers make. This one is one you must fix immediately. I cannot stress this enough. It makes your game pretty much unplayable, and when you're looking at a Steam page with this mistake, it's an immediate turn off as a player. Like, you would skip that game so fast when you see a game doing this mistake. It makes the game look amateurish, and it makes it really annoying to play a game that's doing this mistake. So take a look at this. Does this look appealing? Now, of course, it's not really good quality, the background. Maybe you can notice that I did some changes to the background. But still, some of you are doing pretty much the same thing. Actually, let me find even a better example. Yeah, guys, take a look at this. Now I have a very nice grass background for my game. And I think it looks just fantastic. Or does it? No, not really. Now, what's the problem with texture like this? It's not necessarily the fact that it doesn't really fit the game. To me, that's not the biggest problem. It's the problem, the fact that it has way too much detail and way too much texture. The background is taking away all the attention from what's happening in the game. You can barely even notice the plants and the mushrooms. All you're looking at is the background. And like so many indie games have pretty much the same issue. It's maybe to a lesser extent or in a way that you don't really, like, it's not clear to you that this is the issue they're having. But in many games, the backgrounds have either too much color, contrast, stuff going on, too much detail, or maybe the contrast between the background and the actual game and the foreground is just too little. Like, guys, the wrong color for your background will make your game, first of all, look bad, but it will also affect the gameplay. If the background is taking too much attention, or if it's blending in too much into the rest of your game, then it will make it look much worse, but it will also affect the gameplay. It's hard to see what's happening, it's hard to see where the enemies are, where are the projectiles the enemies are firing. All of that becomes really hard to see if the color of your background is wrong. So you want to make sure that you have clearly separated backgrounds and foregrounds, and that the backgrounds don't have too much detail so that they're not taking all the attention away in your game. And a good test for this is the squint test. If you squint your eyes, can you still see what's going on? Are the gameplay assets still recognizable? If you squint your eyes right now, you cannot see any of the decorations in the game, and if there's not enough contrast between the walls and the floor, then you can't even see where the walls actually are. Like now, if you squint your eyes, it's pretty hard to tell where actually the walls and the floor meet. And that's just bad for the game. Then you end up running into walls or not being able to dodge projectiles. And it just makes the game also really annoying to look at. You have to spend a lot more energy to think about where you're going when you can't really see what's going on that clear. So make sure that when you squint your eyes, your game should be very clear what's happening. And that's not only gonna improve the gameplay of your game, but when you look at, when a player looks at your Steam page, you have like 5 to 10 seconds to convince them that this might be the game they're looking for. So the faster they can see what's going on, the faster they can decide that they actually like your game. If they can't tell what's going on, they're immediately gonna skip your game and move on to the next one where they can faster see what's happening. The fourth C of charming indie game art. Oops, not that one. It's not a mistake per se, it's a cheat code you can use to level up your game art if you're not a skilled artist yet. Yeah, so you don't have to have artistic skill, and if you don't, then you need to stop playing fair basically. There are no rules when it comes to making art in games, in the sense of you don't have to draw everything by hand yourself from your imagination. There are many ways you can augment the process, and in my opinion you should use all of them, and great artists use many of these. Now some of these tips will become redundant as you gain skill, but many of them are used by all artists regardless of level, and many of them are actually even fundamental part of the artistic process. And the first tip is that if you steal from one game, it's theft. If you steal from 50 games, then it's called being an artist. So the idea of basically copying and using reference is that if you are making a platformer or a Metroidvania, and your only inspiration for your visuals and your gameplay and everything is Hollow Knight, then you're just making a Hollow Knight copy. But if you only take inspirations for the crispy movement and gameplay from Hollow Knight, and then you use 10 other references for the visuals and a couple of references for sound and some movie, for example, for the story, then you are being original and you're coming up with something completely new. So for me, my process looks something like this. I have a massive board with references from different games. I use Cult of the Lamb for the cute visual style and the plants, and for the very nice looking animations. And I use Hollow Knight for inspiration for how I can make my game more moody and more like thematic. The world in Hollow Knight feels very alive and story rich, and that's what I want for my game as well, for the thematic side. I use Don't Starve for the kind of cartoony and simplistic style, but still very charming look. I use Hades for the visual effects and for animating my explosions and attacks. I want my attacks to feel almost as juicy as Hades. I use Darkest Dungeon for their super interesting enemy and character designs as inspiration, as well as for the gore and the fleshy bits. I use Nuclear Throne for the super simple layering to create very juicy and interesting effects, as well as the fast-paced roguelike combat. And some other games for simplistic sprites, and for some random artists I follow online for their visual style and how to make basically my sprites look better and how to design interesting items and characters. And finally, I use very specific references. So for example, when I was designing the rat boss, the boss of the first level for my game, I found a bunch of different giant rat and mutant rat references for my reference board. And now I didn't like copy any of these directly, I just used them for inspiration. But honestly, like if you're an indie developer, well, maybe you don't want to just trace over someone else's art, but stuff like perspective can be pretty challenging. So what you can totally do is you can find references online, and you could trace, for example, over some game assets or just objects like photographs to get the perspective of your the elements you're trying to draw right. Then when you remove the object, then you have your object with perfect perspective. You can also like tweak them. You could liquefy if you need some other shapes, or you could use, for example, the perspective tools to alter the perspective if you wanted some other perspective. You could take assets from some game and make sure that your perspective for your assets also matches the right perspective. Getting the perspective right for games can take many years of practice or many months of focused practice at the very least. So using kind of cheat codes like these is, in my opinion, a great way to shortcut the process. And if you don't really care about becoming a great artist, but you just want to make great games, then it's a shortcut that might be well worth taking. And again, if you take all of your perspective and if you just trace over every asset in some game, then you're a thief. You're stealing their art. But if you just take perspective from one game, the style from another, the outline thickness from some other game, then the creation is no longer a copy of one game. Then no one's gonna be able to point out, hey, you stole from Hollow Knight, you stole from Dead Cells, your game is a completely new game with no singular source for inspiration. And that's what it means to steal like an artist. And of course, if you're a good artist, then you would only use the inspiration and take like stylistic choices from different games. But if you're not a great artist, then you can take it further and trace over for perspective, for shape language, stuff like that. And especially for practice, you could totally copy one-to-one different sprites from different games to get better at drawing themselves. The first step could be to copy the sprites, and then you could take it to the next level by taking some sprite and creating a new sprite next to it that is where you try to make a completely unique new sprite that doesn't exist in the game, but make it look as closely as possible like the other sprites in the same game. So if you add the sprite into the other game, you couldn't be able to tell that it's not from the same game. And yeah, one thing to remember is that no one actually cares about the process you use in your game dev journey. They care if the results are good enough. And when people complain about AI slop or other kind of problems with games, it's more about the fact that the result seems like it was not actually made by you. No one wants to play AI games because the AI does a bad product, that the result of the AI is bad. They don't want to play AI games because the overall experience of a game that is made by AI, it's not a holistic experience created from the vision of a game developer. It's just whatever the AI happens to produce. There's no guarantees that it's a cohesive result. And the value of how much a player values the decisions you've made for the game goes down the drain when they know that it's a result of some mathematical formula and series of matrix calculations and not some grand vision of a ambitious and creative game developer who wanted to make their dream game real. Players don't mind the shortcuts, they mind the compromises you make to make your vision real. So the fourth C is to cheat. So do whatever it takes to make the game you want to make. Steal like an artist, use multiple references, use multiple sources, and trace and deform. Just make sure that the result is exactly what you want and not a compromise because some AI generator gave you a result that you're happy with, but it's not what you intended. Now, the fifth C is basically the reason why asset flip games look bad and you don't want to play them if you realize a game is just taking a bunch of assets from free asset packs around the internet. It's also a big reason why people complain about AI slop games. It's also a reason why it's really hard to stand out with pixel art games and why indies, in my opinion, should avoid pixel art. At least until you actually have a real vision of why your game should have pixel art, and it's not just because it seems easier to produce pixel art games than other types of visual styles for your games. And basically the idea is that the personality of your game, the visual personality that the visuals are giving off is much more important than the actual technical art skill in your game. And it again brings us to the point of being intentional with it. The intentionality and the kind of decisions you make are much more important than the actual quality. And also, like, if your games are not visually different and unique, they blend in with the other games, but if they are very different visually, then whenever you make new games and you post about your games, the people who liked your games can instantly see that, oh yeah, this is from that developer. There are many developers where you can instantly tell who made the game, and the style they have is just like part of their brand. It's part of why people like keep coming back to their games. And when you take a look at these screenshots, if you've played Binding of Isaac, you immediately wonder, wait a minute, is this from the guy who made Binding of Isaac? And you can see that, yeah, it is from the same guy. And that's kind of the point. When you plan on having a long career as an indie game developer, once your games start getting people to recognize them, then it's an asset if you have your own personal style and your personality in your games. It's something that people recognize instantly when you post stuff online, when you make videos, when they see your Steam page. And that's why the fifth C is to craft your own style. The imperfections and mistakes you choose to leave in your art, and the things you exaggerate and the things you just don't do, they are what make your brand and the style for your games. And you can take your time with it. You don't have to have it instantly, but as you make more games, usually you start to see that you like some kinds of visuals for your games. And I would encourage you to go all in with the style you've chosen, with the things you choose to make different about your game's visuals. If you're making a game that looks exactly like all of the other games on Steam, then you're not gonna stand out, and a lot of players will skim over your game just because there's nothing different they can latch on to. Now finally, the final sixth C. This one is most important for basically getting your... When someone is looking at your Steam page, they're looking at your trailers, or when they're actually playing your game. This one is the most important for making sure that your game lands and is fun to play and actually delivers on why the players would want to play it in the first place. If you have a lot of complexity in like features in your game, skill trees and progression and inventory systems and upgrades and interesting enemies, like all of that is good to have, but it means nothing if you get this part wrong. If your game is about killing monsters and enemies. If that isn't satisfying, then the players will get bored and they won't want to play your games. Your Steam page will also instantly lose interest without this. If you look at a Steam page and the fantasy of your game is, let's say, collecting coins, you run around and you collect coins, but if every time you collect coin, the coin just disappears and your number goes up, well, that really isn't very interesting. But as soon as you add some juice to it, you add a bling sound, you add some visual sparks when you collect the coins, it gets much more interesting. If in my game the enemies would just disappear when you hit them 3 times, that would make the combat very boring. But now in my game I have splatter flying around, the enemies flash and get knocked back. It's much more interesting to actually do the combat in my game. Even though the game's kind of hook is about upgrading the character and exploring the mines, the day-to-day or moment-to-moment actions you're doing is the combat, and that needs to be satisfying itself for your games to land with the players. So the final 6th C is candy. You have to make your game toy-like. The actual interaction needs to be fun and interesting. You know, eating candy is fun. You don't need a progression mechanic or level ups or a skill tree to have fun while you're eating candy. So for your game as well, your basic actions should be fun. Whether it's combat or collecting stuff or exploring, you should make the interactions the player is doing moment to moment during the average 30 seconds of your game fun on their own. So those were the 6 Infinity Stones, the 6 C's of charming indie game art: consistency, cohesion, clarity, cheat, craft, and candy. If you follow all of those 6 steps, I guarantee your game will be 300% better than if you don't follow them. And if it's not, I will personally refund you the money you spent watching this video. Now, if you think I'm wrong, or if you liked the video, don't tell me anonymously in the comments. Come to my group in the link in description and tell me face to face. And if all of this sounds good, but you don't know how to actually make sprites in your drawing program, or if you don't even have a drawing program, then watch this video right here, where I show you how you can use Krita and all of my tricks I've learned over 7 years of making game assets with Krita. Now, there are some real time-saving tricks you can use to not only save a lot of time, but also make your sprites look a lot better. So check that out if you wanna level up your sprite making game. I'll see you in there.